Wrong building, sweetheart. The food stamps office is down the street. The words slammed through the marble lobby like a punch wrapped in sarcasm. Heads turned, people froze. Even the security scanners seemed to fall silent. Officer Marcus Kane leaned on the checkpoint metal detector with the swagger of a man who thought the whole courthouse belonged to him. His smirk curled like he'd been waiting all morning for someone to bully. Sarah Washington stopped mid-step. Heels firm, shoulders squared, visitor's pass already in her hand. She wore a clean charcoal suit, crisp enough to show she didn't come here to play games. "I have business here," she said calmly. Kane didn't even look at her pass. "What business? Baby daddy locked up again?" A couple bystanders exchanged looks. Did he really just say that? But Sarah didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't give him the reaction he was fishing for. "I'm here for a court proceeding, officer," Kane scoffed, stepping closer, voice dripping bitterness. "Sure you are. People like you don't belong in real courtrooms." Sarah met his eyes, steady, sharp. "People like me." The lobby held its breath, and Kane, with all his arrogance and ignorance, had no idea. He just insulted the wrong woman, and then, before she could even blink, crack! His hand came across her face so fast it snapped her head to the side, her visitor's pass fluttering to the floor like a fallen leaf. Gasps rippled through the lobby. A mother covered her son's eyes. Someone whispered, "Did he really just—" Sarah inhaled slowly, touching the sting on her cheek. But her eyes didn't flicker with fear. If anything, something behind them sharpened. She crouched, picked up her scattered papers, and calmly read his badge aloud. "Officer Kane. I won't forget." Kane scoffed. "Yeah, all right. Keep your fake papers and get out of my lobby." She walked away without raising her voice, without threatening, without anything except a quiet, chilling certainty. And 2 weeks later, Officer Kane would learn just how badly he'd misjudged the woman he thought he could bully like some rookie schoolyard target. Because when Sarah Washington walked into that courtroom next time, she wasn't just holding evidence, she was holding Kane's whole future in her hands. 2 weeks later, the federal courtroom buzzed like a kicked hornet's nest. Folks shuffled in, whispering about the civil rights case Washington vs. Kane. It wasn't every day a courthouse security officer got dragged into court by the same woman he kicked out. At the defendant's table sat Marcus Kane, stiff as a church pew. He wore his uniform like armor, chest puffed just a little too high, chin lifted like he expected a parade. This was his comfort zone, a system that had protected him for 20 years. A place where men like him always seemed to get the benefit of the doubt. His lawyer, Peterson, smoothed his tie and whispered, "Stick to the plan, you've done this before." Oh, he had, far too many times. When he took the stand, he leaned into the microphone like a man settling into a recliner. "I was performing my assigned duties at the security checkpoint when I observed a suspicious individual attempting to bypass standard protocols." The jury blinked. Suspicious individual. Attempting to bypass protocols. Folks in the gallery exchanged looks. Some shook their heads slowly. Peterson nodded encouragingly. "And what did this individual do?" Kane put on his best, concerned officer voice. "She was aggressive from the moment she approached my station. Hostile. Refused to show proper documentation. I feared for my safety, so I responded using minimal, necessary force. Minimal force. Minimal force." Sarah sat at the plaintiff's table, back straight, expression unreadable. She didn't shake her head, didn't scowl, didn't interrupt. She just made notes with this eerie calm that made Kane flick nervous glances her way. Peterson continued, "Officer Kane, have you ever been accused of inappropriate conduct before?" Kane smiled. "No, my record is spotless. I've served this courthouse with honor for 2 decades. That was the moment Sarah paused her writing. Just paused. Then slowly lifted her eyes and looked right at him. Not angry, not shaken, just knowing. And for the first time all morning, Kane's confidence wavered. Something about her stare made him shift in his seat, like the room had suddenly gotten hotter. He had no idea the bombshells waiting for him. No clue what was coming down the pipeline. No clue that his entire story was moments away from unraveling like cheap thread. Because when Sarah finally takes the stand-in, Kane isn't ready for a single word, especially the truth she's about to lay out. When the judge finally called, "Miss Sarah Washington, please take the stand," the energy in the room shifted like someone opened a window during a storm. Sarah rose with a quiet, steady confidence, no theatrics, no anger. She walked like a woman who'd carried heavier burdens than this courtroom could ever imagine. She adjusted the microphone. "Sarah Elizabeth Washington," she stated. Her voice was clean, crisp, and steady enough to cut glass. "Miss Washington, tell us what happened on March 15th. Sarah opened her notebook, color-coded tabs, precise handwriting, the kind of organization that made jurors lean closer. "I arrived at approximately 9:15 a.m. for legitimate business. I approached the security checkpoint with proper identification in hand." The jurors nodded slowly. They'd seen the visitors pass earlier. It wasn't some flimsy piece of printer paper. It looked official, and it was. Sarah continued. "Before he even examined my documentation, Officer Kane directed me to leave, implying I belonged at the welfare office." She didn't dramatize, didn't embellish, didn't even raise her voice, but every word landed like a hammer on stone. Kane shifted at the defense table, cheeks tightening. "What else did he say?" the attorney asked. "He asked if my baby daddy was locked up again. When I attempted to explain my business, he stated that people like me don't belong in real courtrooms. People like me." The words lingered in the air like smoke. "And then?" the attorney asked. "Officer Kane struck me across the face with an open palm, forcefully." Peterson shot up. "Objection, characterization." Sarah didn't blink. "Officer Kane made physical contact with my face, using sufficient force to leave a visible contusion. I sought medical evaluation immediately afterward." The photos were passed around, clear finger marks across her cheek, the kind impossible to fake. The jurors' expressions hardened. One older woman folded her arms, glaring at Kane like she was staring down a thief who'd taken something precious. When Peterson began cross-examination, he underestimated her, just like Kane had. "Ms. Washington," he said smugly, "isn't it true you were trying to enter a restricted area of the courthouse?" "No," Sarah replied calmly. "I had a valid visitor's pass for the hearing I intended to observe." "What hearing?" A faint smile touched her lips. "I was observing police reform proceedings as a concerned citizen." "And what qualifies you to be concerned about that subject?" Sarah met his gaze with a look that said he was asking the wrong question entirely. "I have extensive knowledge of departmental procedures." Kane's eyes narrowed. "How? Why?" Peterson pushed again. "What exactly do you know about Officer Kane's service record?" Sarah paused, looked at her watch, then back at the attorney. "More than you think." The room stirred. Because the courtroom learns that Sarah didn't just know Kane's past. She knew things he prayed would never see daylight. The night before the hearing, Sarah Washington sat in her home office. A space filled with quiet power. Family photos, degrees, certificates. But most striking were the law enforcement plaques neatly arranged on the wall. They weren't decorative. They told a story. A story Kane would have never believed. She sat at her desk, reviewing a thick manila folder marked Kane, Marcus, Personnel Review. 15 complaints. 5 investigations that mysteriously went nowhere. Supervisors losing evidence. Patterns ignored. People silenced. It wasn't just misconduct. It was a blueprint of corruption. As she spread the papers across her desk, her daughter Maya leaned in the doorway. "Mom," she said softly, "why didn't you just hire a lawyer? Why do all this yourself?" Sarah looked up, her eyes gentle yet fierce. "Because sometimes, baby girl, justice needs a witness who understands the system from the inside out." Maya walked closer, glancing over the documents. "Is it because you're black?" she asked quietly. Sarah smiled, sadly, knowingly. "That's part of it. But it's bigger than me. It's about holding folks accountable who think the badge makes them invincible." Her phone buzzed. A video call. Police Commissioner Reynolds filled the screen, his uniform crisp and formal. Everything's ready for tomorrow, Sarah, he said. The announcement at 2 p.m. will make waves. Sarah nodded. Thank you, sir. The timing is perfect. Maya blinked. Wait. Announcement. What announcement? Sarah didn't answer directly. Instead, she stood and walked to her closet. She pulled out a uniform. Not just any uniform. Dress blues with 3 shining stars. Maya gasped. Mom, you're... Sarah smiled softly. Yes, tomorrow at 2 p.m. I'm being sworn in as the new chief of police. Maya covered her mouth, stunned. And suddenly the puzzle pieces clicked. The evidence, the calm confidence, the meticulous preparation, the notebook full of tabs. Kane has no idea, Maya whispered. No, Sarah said, sitting back down at her desk. But he will. She tucked the personnel file into her briefcase alongside her swearing-in speech. One would end a career. The other would start a new era. As midnight crept closer, she whispered, Tomorrow at 2 p.m., everything changes. The courtroom won't just hear the truth, they'll watch an entire career crumble on screen, one video at a time. By the second morning of trial, Officer Kane strutted into the courthouse like a man who thought yesterday was just a warm-up. He flashed little smirks to the gallery, pretending he didn't see the whispers or the glares. But that swagger started leaking out of him the minute Sarah's legal team walked in with 3 boxes of evidence. Thick files, drives, certified documents. Attorney Williams stepped forward like he'd been waiting his whole career for this moment. Your Honor, the plaintiff is ready to present video evidence obtained through public records. Peterson blinked fast. Video evidence? What video evidence? Williams plugged in the courthouse's main display. 4 unedited angles of March 15th. Kane froze. Not body cam. Not his edited version. The building's real surveillance feeds. The first video loaded. Timestamp 9:14 a.m. Kane was seen laughing with another officer, phone in hand, posture relaxed. No tension, no alertness, no security threat. Williams narrated calmly, Note the defendant's non-emergency demeanor. Then at 9:15, Sarah entered the frame, visitor pass already in hand. No aggression, no raised voice. Just a woman approaching a checkpoint. The audio kicked in. Kane's voice rang out. Wrong building, sweetheart. The food stamps office is down the street. Jurors stiffened. A man in the gallery muttered, Oh, hell no. Sarah's calm reply echoed, I have business here. But Kane didn't even glance at her pass. What business? Baby daddy locked up again? The jury recoiled. Even the judge's brows shot up. Then the slap, loud, ugly, undeniable. Gasps filled the room. Sarah didn't move a muscle on screen. No threat, no step forward, no aggressive gesture. Her hands were literally at her sides. Williams paused the video. Ladies and gentlemen, Officer Kane testified that Ms. Washington advanced toward him aggressively and refused to comply with commands. You have just witnessed the truth. She did none of those things. That wasn't even the worst part. Next came the side-by-side comparison, left screen, Kane's edited body cam footage. Right screen, the full original file recovered by digital forensics. Every insulting remark, cut. Every racial jab, cut. The slap, cut. The jury watched deception unfold in real time. Then courthouse employee Janet Morrison testified. Oh, I saw it all, she said. And that wasn't the first time he talked down to folks like that, especially people of color. Kane shrank deeper into his seat. When Kane learns Sarah didn't just expose his lies, she uncovered the entire dirty trail he hoped would stay buried forever. With the video evidence gutting Kane's defense, Williams stepped forward, holding a familiar manila folder, the exact type Sarah had reviewed in her home office the night before. Your Honor, Williams said, we move to enter Officer Kane's complete personnel file. Peterson bolted to his feet. Your Honor, this is irrelevant. But the judge cut him off. Sit down, Counselor. If it's patent evidence relating to credibility, it's coming in. Kane's eyes went wide. He shook his head slightly, mouthing, No, not that. But it was too late. Williams began reading. 15 formal complaints over 20 years, jurors murmured. 15 wasn't a number. It was a red flag the size of a billboard. Williams continued. Not one fully investigated, not one properly documented. all involving people of color being detained, screened, or harassed without cause. Then came the radio logs. Kane's voice filled the room again. "Another welfare queen trying to game the system. Handled it." The jurors visibly recoiled. Then Janet Morrison, the longtime courthouse clerk, added gasoline to the fire. "Oh, honey, he's been doing this forever. Folks complained, but his boss just shrugged. One supervisor literally told me, Kane keeps the riffraff out." Riffraff. That word landed like poison. The courtroom buzzed with anger. Next came the digital forensics expert. He confirmed, line by line, that Kane personally edited his body cam footage. Segments were removed intentionally. This was not an accidental malfunction. Kane rubbed his face with both hands, his confidence now dust. Everything around him, his uniform, his reputation, his lies, was falling apart like wet paper. Sarah watched from the plaintiff's table, silent, steady, waiting. She didn't gloat, didn't smirk, didn't celebrate. She simply observed like a woman who had been expecting this moment for a very long time. When the judge asked if the plaintiff had anything more to add, Sarah glanced at her watch. 1:45 p.m., she smiled. "Not yet, Your Honor." Something in her tone made the room lean forward. Peterson whispered urgently to Kane. "What does she know? What is she planning?" Kane whispered back through clenched teeth. I don't know." But deep down he did. That chill down his spine, that creeping dread. It was the first sign he understood. His worst day wasn't today. It was 15 minutes away. The doors will open at 2 p.m., and the man who slapped Sarah will finally learn who she really is. At exactly 2 p.m., right on the dot, like someone backstage flipped a switch, the courtroom doors opened with a commanding thud. Every head turned. 2 officers in dress uniforms stepped inside first, then another. Then, Police Commissioner Reynolds, wearing ceremonial blues. Medals polished so bright the lights caught them like mirrors. The courtroom shifted from legal proceeding to historic moment in 3 seconds flat. Judge Martinez blinked. "Commissioner, this is not a scheduled appearance." "My apologies, Your Honor," he said, voice booming across the room. "But I bring an announcement that cannot wait." Kane stiffened. Peterson's pen slipped right out of his fingers. People sat forward, whispers bubbling like boiling water. Then Sarah Washington rose from her seat. Not slowly, not dramatically, just intentionally, and that alone changed the air. She unbuttoned her blazer, took it off, folded it neatly, and underneath, her dress uniform, midnight blue, silver buttons, service ribbons, and on each shoulder, 3 gleaming stars. The room gasped so hard the air pressure shifted. Commissioner Reynolds announced, "Effective immediately, Sarah Elizabeth Washington has been sworn in as the new Chief of Police for our metropolitan area." If the ceiling had fallen in, Kane couldn't have looked more stunned. His jaw dropped, eyes wide, color draining from his face like someone unplugged him. Sarah turned toward him, slow, calm, utterly composed. "Officer Kane," she said evenly, "I believe we have unfinished business." The words sliced through him like a blade made of truth. Peterson scrambled like he'd just realized he'd walked into the wrong courtroom entirely. "Hey, Your Honor! This creates a conflict of interest. She can't be his superior officer, and the plaintiff—" Sarah answered before the judge could. "My appointment occurred after the incident and after this lawsuit was filed. There is no conflict." Her voice carried authority so natural, so absolute, the courtroom went quiet as a graveyard. Commissioner Reynolds stepped forward again, placing a sealed document on the judge's bench. "Chief Washington's first official act is to initiate a broad internal review of misconduct cases, including those concerning Officer Kane." Kane inhaled sharply. He knew what that meant. Every dirty trick, every covered-up complaint, every victim he dismissed. All of it was now under her jurisdiction. The hunter had become the hunted, and he'd never seen it coming. But what comes next isn't just justice. It's the moment Sarah finally holds Kane accountable, badge to badge, face to face. Silence smothered the courtroom as Sarah, Chief Washington now, stepped toward the witness stand like a general walking the battlefield she already conquered. Kane sat there trembling, hands clasped together, face ghost pale. His arrogance, gone. His swagger, gone. His certainty that he'd win, gone. Now he was just a man who'd slapped someone he should have saluted. "Officer Kane!" Sarah began, voice commanding yet eerily calm. "Please stand!" He didn't move at first, like his legs forgot how to work. "Stand," she repeated, this time sharper, official. Kane obeyed automatically. Years of training kicked in, but fear twisted every muscle in his face. Sarah opened a thick file, the one he recognized the moment she lifted it. His personnel record. The version he never wanted anyone to see. The judge nodded. "You may proceed, Chief Washington." Sarah flipped to the first page. "Officer Kane, how many misconduct complaints have been filed against you in the past 20 years? He swallowed hard. I don't recall." She stepped closer. "I do." She read them aloud, one by one. Case by case, name by name. Maria Gonzalez, federal attorney, harassed and detained without cause. Dr. James Mitchell, U.S. District Judge, questioned about being in the wrong entrance. Angela Davis, law professor, subjected to additional screening without justification. 12 more individuals, all people of color, all treated improperly under your watch. Kane's shoulders slumped lower with each name. "Did you file any misconduct reports against white visitors in 20 years?" she asked. Silence. "That would be a no, I assume." His breath hitched. People in the gallery shook their heads in bitter recognition. Sarah's tone hardened, not loud, just sharp, precise, surgical. "You didn't just violate policy. You undermined public trust. You cost this department over $2 million in settlements." Jurors gasped. Kane looked ready to faint. "And worst of all," Sarah continued, "you trained junior officers to follow your example. You taught them profiling. You taught them prejudice. You taught them fear." She let the file drop onto the table with a heavy thump. "Officer Kane, as your chief of police, and based on overwhelming evidence of misconduct, you are terminated from the police department effective immediately." Kane collapsed into his chair, covering his face. His gun and badge were taken, his career ended, his arrogance shattered. The same woman he'd humiliated, slapped, and dismissed had just ended the career he'd built on intimidation. But if Kane thought losing his badge was the end, we'll show him the real consequences haven't even started yet. After Kane's badge was taken, and his career evaporated in front of everyone, the courtroom buzzed like a beehive knocked off its branch. But nothing prepared them for Chief Sarah Washington's closing argument. She rose slowly, her 3-star uniform catching the light. Not flashy, not arrogant, just powerful in that quiet, unshakable way truth tends to be. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice steady but carrying decades of weight. "This case never started as Sarah Washington versus Marcus Kane. It started long before that." The jury leaned in. Even the judge looked captured. Sarah held up her visitor's pass, the same one that fell when Kane slapped her. "This simple piece of paper should have granted me safe entry to a public building. Instead, it became a reason for a man in uniform to treat me like an enemy." She continued, "Officer Kane testified that he feared for his safety. But you saw the footage. You heard the audio. You watched him escalate a non-threatening situation into violence." Her eyes swept across the jurors, calm, direct, unwavering. "In 20 years on the force, I've learned something important. Power doesn't corrupt, it exposes. Officer Kane didn't suddenly become prejudiced on March 15th. He simply got caught." Even Peterson, Kane's attorney, looked like he couldn't argue with that. Sarah added, "This verdict isn't just about what happened to me. It's about what happens to every citizen who walks through those courthouse doors. People should not have to earn basic respect. They should not have to prove they belong in a public building." Her voice tightened, not angry, but deeply, profoundly disappointed. "When Officer Kane struck me, he didn't just slap a woman. He slapped the Constitution he swore to uphold." The jury shifted. Some nodded. Others pursed their lips. All understood. Peterson's closing argument lasted 5 minutes and sounded like a man begging the sea not to rise. Then came Sarah's brief rebuttal. The defense asks for forgiveness without accountability, but accountability must come first. That is how justice works. By the time both sides rested, the room was so quiet you could hear someone's pen tapping on the wooden benches. The jury went to deliberate. It took them less than 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman spoke with a trembling voice. In the matter of Washington versus Kane, we find the defendant liable for assault and civil rights violations. We recommend damages of $500,000 and referral for federal criminal charges. The courtroom gasped. Kane covered his face with shaking hands. But Sarah didn't smile, didn't cheer, didn't gloat. She simply exhaled, finally, like a woman who'd carried this weight long enough. The verdict is only the beginning. Sarah's next move turns justice into long-term change and Kane's nightmare into reality. The verdict hit like a thunderclap, and Kane looked like the storm had landed right on top of him. But Sarah wasn't done. When the judge asked if she had anything to say regarding the damages awarded, Sarah stood once more. Your Honor, she said gently, I respectfully decline the financial compensation. You could practically hear Kane's jaw hit the floor. Sarah added, Instead, I request the funds be directed toward establishing a police bias training program and a civilian oversight committee. The courtroom erupted in whispers, some stunned, some emotional, some flat-out inspired. Even the judge paused before replying. Chief Washington, your request is granted. The funds will be allocated as you directed. Kane stared at Sarah with a hollow, defeated expression. She had every right to take the money and walk away. But she chose something far more powerful, systemic change. And she wasn't finished. The judge cleared her throat. This court also recommends immediate criminal charges for assault under color of authority and civil rights violations. Kane froze. Criminal charges? Federal marshals approached. Kane's spine curled inward as the reality sank in. He wasn't walking out of this courtroom as an officer. He wasn't walking out free. He was walking out in handcuffs. His cuffs clicked shut with a cold metallic snap that echoed through the room. The same sound he had used on countless others, just never expected to hear behind him. And outside on the courthouse steps, Sarah addressed the reporters who swarmed the plaza. Today is not about revenge, she said firmly. It's about responsibility. Today proves that law enforcement is not above the law. We are accountable to it. A reporter yelled, Chief Washington, do you consider this personal justice? Sarah shook her head. This isn't about me. It's about every person who's ever walked into this courthouse and felt judged before they even spoke. Today marks a step toward restoring trust. Behind her, the crowd erupted in applause, loud, long, emotional. Kane, meanwhile, was escorted to a holding vehicle, head down, steps heavy, the cameras capturing every moment. It was over. But for Sarah, something new was beginning. She walked down those courthouse steps not as a victim, not as a plaintiff, but as a leader carrying a message people had waited years to hear. But if you think Kane's downfall ends here, reveals the long-term fallout, what prison did to him, what reform did to the city, and how Sarah changed everything. 6 months after the verdict, the world around Marcus Kane looked nothing like the life he once lived. Gone was the badge. Gone was the swagger. Gone was the courthouse where he strutted like he owned the place. Now, he folded laundry in a federal facility, orange jumpsuit, name tag instead of badge. Supervisors half his age barking orders at him all day. And prison? Prison had a way of stripping a man down to the studs. Most inmates didn't know his past, but a few recognized him from the news. You that courthouse guy? The one who smacked the chief? Damn, bro, you messed up. Every time he heard it, shame crawled up his spine. His wife filed for divorce the week after sentencing. She said she was done being married to a headline. His kids changed their last name, wanted no connection to the man who went viral for the wrong reasons. And his pension? Revoked. 20 years of service flushed like yesterday's trash. Kane spent his nights staring at the ceiling, replaying the slap over and over in his mind. He used to think it was a minor moment, a small flex of authority he'd done 1,000 times. But now, he realized that slap was the spark that burned down his entire life. Across town, Chief Sarah Washington stood in her office overlooking the city. A very different story unfolding on her side of the world, under her leadership. Courthouse complaints from people of color dropped by 78%. New screening protocols emphasized respect, not suspicion. A civilian oversight board began reviewing misconduct reports. Bias training, funded by Kane's $500,000 judgment, had become a national model. The department had changed. The energy was different. Officers walked with purpose now, not fear, not ego, not "I'm in charge." Real leadership had replaced intimidation. Sarah addressed a new academy class that morning, a diverse, bright-eyed group who looked nothing like the old guard. "You've been given a badge," she told them, "not to judge people, not to intimidate them, but to serve them. That badge doesn't put you above the community. It makes you responsible to the community." The recruits nodded solemnly. Some even teared up quietly. Her daughter Maya watched from the back row, pride glowing in her eyes. "Mom," she said afterward, "you really changed everything." Sarah smiled softly. "I didn't change it alone. I just opened the door. Now we walk through it together." Kane, meanwhile, scrubbed uniforms in a prison basement, unaware the world had already moved on without him. When the city honors Sarah publicly, one last unexpected twist reminds everyone why this story became a symbol nationwide. 6 months after becoming chief, Sarah Washington walked onto the stage of a packed civic auditorium. Cameras flashed, people cheered, and signs reading "Accountability Matters" waved high. Tonight, she wasn't here for a case, a verdict, or a fight. Tonight was for something bigger. She was receiving the National Leadership Award for Police Reform, an honor given only to a handful of leaders in the country's history. As she stepped up to the podium, the crowd rose to their feet in a thunderous standing ovation. Reporters captured every angle. Community members wiped away tears. Young girls in the front row looked at her like she was a superhero come to life. Sarah rested her hands on the podium, letting the emotions settle. "I stand here tonight," she began, "not because I am perfect, but because I refused to be silent." The room went still. Our justice system is built on the idea that all people deserve dignity. Yet, too many have been judged before they even speak. Too many have been dismissed, doubted, and disrespected because of how they look. She paused. And sometimes, it takes one painful moment to expose a truth we've ignored for years. Everyone knew what she meant. Everyone had seen the video. Everyone remembered the slap that woke a city. But that moment, she continued, was not the end of the story. It was the beginning. Behind her, a video montage played. Officers training with new protocols, community dialogues, reforms being implemented, people smiling again in a courthouse where fear once lived. Sarah's voice softened. "Justice is not about revenge. It's about change. Real, lasting change." The crowd applauded again, loud, long, heartfelt. And then something unexpected happened. As she stepped off the stage, an elderly woman approached her, cane in hand, eyes warm and wise. "Chief Washington," she said, "my grandson used to skip jury duty because of how he was treated at that courthouse. But last month, he served for the first time. He said he felt safe." Sarah felt her throat tighten. "That means more to me than any award," she whispered. The woman squeezed her hand. "You didn't just fix a system, you restored faith." Later that night, as Sarah drove home with Maya beside her, city lights glowing outside the window, she finally let the weight of the journey settle. "Mom," Maya said softly, "you proved everybody wrong." Sarah looked out at the skyline. "No," she said. "I proved what happens when you stand up, no matter who tries to knock you down." And as Chief Sarah Washington walked forward into a future she helped reshape, the city finally understood. Justice isn't loud. Justice isn't cruel. Justice is steady, patient, and inevitable. And when it arrives, it changes everything. If this story inspired you, don't leave without showing some love. Hit like to support Black Girl Storytime. Subscribe so you never miss a story where the truth wins. Turn on notifications. You'll want to see what happens next. And tell us below. Has anyone ever underestimated you and lived to regret it? Your story might inspire someone else today. If you thought this story was wild, you haven't seen anything yet. Tap the next video. You do not want to miss how this judge's world comes crashing down. The judge thought he ran that courtroom. He thought pointing a finger at her would end the discussion. But when she said, "You're under investigation, sir," the walls of his power began to crumble. What she revealed next didn't just shock the courtroom. It exposed a secret he's been hiding for years.